Good morning and welcome to the Crafty Canary for your tip on Tuesday. Today I'm going to show you how to sew a binding back on that has come loose in the wash. Now this can happen on something like a blanket. I have this fleece blanket here that the binding has come off, and that's what we'll actually be using today to show you. See how in the wash it's just come off. It's just with one of those chain stitches from the manufacturer, and those just come out super easily. If it's loose at all, it can just come right off, and that's what happened to this blanket of my son's in the wash. It just came right off. So we have about, about 10 inches where we're going to need to sew it back on. But it can happen to something like one of these pot holders like I use on the top of my hanging towels. It can happen on different pieces of clothing, maybe a binding on a shirt. Like this shirt, it might even happen to. This has a binding on the edge here. And if that were to come off, I could use this technique to sew that back on. So let me show you an easy, simple way to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay it out on my work table or on a flat surface. If you don't have a work table, you can use your dining room or kitchen table. Just make sure it's clean, and you might even put a cardboard cutting board over that to ensure that it's clean and to give yourself a little bit of working area. But first of all, I've got this long string that came off in the wash, so I'm going to cut that to begin with, and I'm going to go pretty close to where the stitches start. And if you are, which I am an experienced sewer, if you are an experienced sewer, you may be able to just do this at the machine. You may be able to just fold this binding down and stitch as you go. But I highly recommend pinning it, even if you are an experienced sewer, because then you will be sure that you get the top and the bottom both included, because as you pin it, you're going to make sure you go through each side at the top and underneath. When you're doing it at the machine, sometimes you can misjudge a little bit and miss, and then you have to go back and do it again. So to avoid having to go back and do things again, you might take just a little bit of extra time to pin in the beginning. And also, if this were not fleece or synthetic, I would be using an iron if it were cotton or natural fibers. But this especially, fleece you don't generally iron on, and this is very, you can tell just even probably looking at it on the camera that it's very synthetic. And if I were to put an iron to that, it would probably shrink up instantly and destroy it. So we're not going to use an iron in this case, but in a case of something cotton, something natural, I would definitely use the iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold in, and you can see that it's still got a lot of the creases where it was folded. So I'm going to fold in this edge. I'm even going to use a pin or two to hold it down. And I've got a pad underneath here between my cover and my table, so the pins will kind of stick. If you have one of those cardboard cutting boards, it will also do that. If not, do it like this. Just lift it up and pin it. But then you have to go in and unpin it, of course. And on this side, I'm going to do the same thing, just kind of give myself some, just to get it to stay under while I'm working with it. So now I will pick it up and pin it, because sticking it into the pad is going to mean I can't move it. That was not real smart, was it? All right, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to put the underside with that part folded underneath, and the edge of the blanket is going to go on the middle of the binding, and come down here and get my pin and put it in, and making sure, oh, see, look, I missed. And you can do that with the machine, and then you don't have the underneath of the binding caught. So it's good that we're pinning. So I'm going to go back and make sure that I catch both edges with that pin. Do the same thing as we continue. My hands are so dry that my fingers are sticking on this yucky fabric. That's no fun. See, we caught it. Okay, now I can take these out, but just make sure that they stay under. Okay, now that I'm near the end, go ahead and take these pins out. I don't want this raw edge showing, so I'm going to turn it under, making sure that the edges of my binding are turned in. Turn that under, and then go to my binding, go to my blanket where the binding is sewn on, and pin it real good. Now, I might want to make sure that that is tucked underneath so I can use my pin, kind of tuck it under, pin it, make sure the underside is good, don't have any raw edges showing. Catch this one and kind of tuck it under. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. I'm taking the pin and the edge that was sticking out there like this, I'm tucking it back up under the binding so that it doesn't show. There we go. All right, let's take it to the machine and sew it down. So here we are back at the machine, and I'm going to find where my stitches ended and where I cut that string. Oops, I just knocked my pressure foot off. That's not good. So I'm finding that, and that's where I'm going to start. And notice that I have 2 stitches that I'm going to have to make, and these are pretty big. I don't know that my stitch length will even get that big, but I'm going to set it on the longest, and it will look a little bit different. Unfortunately, home repairs cannot look exactly like they come from a manufacturer, from a factory, and so we're going to just try to get it as close as we can. We'll make our stitch as big as we can. It probably won't be that big, and my thread won't be exactly the same, but we'll do our best. And as I sew, I'm going to start on the one that's closest to the edge of the binding, to the blanket part, because I want to make sure that everything catches, and then I'll just have my pins out to be able to sew that second stitch. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to match it up as best I can. Hold my end threads. I'm always really sure to hold my end threads. Sorry about my hand in the way there. And come down, making sure that I'm pretty much right where it needs to be. All right, and let's stitch a couple of stitches, back stitch to hold that in good because we don't want it coming out again. And sew, and you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a line where the previous stitches were. So you want to try to sew on that line as much as possible. And sometimes it gets where the edge gets caught up a little in this groove of the presser foot. So when that happens, I want to make sure I stop, lift up my presser foot, put it back down so that I'm not sewing over the top of that. Very carefully and very slowly, making sure that you don't get your fingers in the way. See, I don't know if you can see, but it did it again. So I'm going to lift up that presser foot, push that underneath the presser foot, making sure it stays under there. And it does it a lot when you're sewing binding on, whether you're the one originating the binding or you're replacing binding. It's just part of having that edge so close to that groove of the presser foot, and you just kind of have to keep pressing it under. All right, now I'm coming to my pin that is crosswise here, so I want to make sure I don't sew over that. So I'm going to slowly go up to it, take it out, and I'm to the end of my binding where I had the raw edges turned under. So I'm going to sew a little bit over it and meet the stitch that's still there, back stitch a few stitches and make sure it's going to stay in, and lift up. And we'll cut our threads. And check and make sure that everything looks good on the bottom before you go on. You might have to end up taking some things out, but if so, take the time to do it so that it looks really nice and so that you don't have raw edges and things coming out again in the wash. So mine looks good, so we're gonna go ahead and do the other stitch. Same thing, I'm coming to the point where I cut off that thread. I'm going to hold my threads, back stitch, and stitch right along where that old stitch was. This one is going to go a little faster and easier because I don't have that edge that's going to keep going into that groove in the middle of my presser foot. So here we are. It's back on. It's not perfect. You can kind of see bulgy edges. It would have been easier if I could have ironed it and looked a little bit better. And if I were doing it on a shirt or something that I was wearing, I would have been a little bit more careful. But it's on. It's not going to come off. My son is going to be really happy to have his cozy blanket back because it's been sitting in my mending pile for a long time waiting to do this video. So I hope that that has helped. I hope you can sew on a binding maybe that's come off in the wash, and that that's helpful for you, especially if you're a beginning sewer. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments, and I'd love to hear your comments on how you fix different things as well, or if you have any other projects you'd like me to do on my channel. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe and please like this video, and come back next time for another great tip on Tuesday. Bye-bye.